Feliz Cinco de Mayo. For today, even though you're not going to necessarily see this video on the 5th of May, I am celebrating with at least one traditional Mexican recipe. Tonight, I'm also going to make some enchiladas with my own personal sauce. That's coming in a later video. But what we see in front of us is the materials to make something called pan de muerto, or literally bread of the dead. And it's a really nice, sweet, fluffy bread that usually includes an interesting spice like anise, or in this case, I'm going to be using caraway seed. The first thing we're actually going to do, though, is turn around and get on the stove to begin cooking our first ingredients. We start with a saucepan, a small one, at a medium-low heat. It doesn't have to be too terribly warm, because what we're going to do is we're actually going to gently cook our butter, our whole milk, and our orange zest for a few minutes so that everything has a chance to melt and combine. We might bring it to a very light boil, but very light. So now you can see the butter has entirely melted and our milk is a little bit warm. We see some steam coming off of the pan. I am going to take the temperature of my mixture. It's a little bit easier and deeper liquid. And right now it's quite warm, 60, 65 degrees Celsius. That's going to be far above 110 degrees Fahrenheit or 43 degrees Celsius. And we really need this mixture to be warm, which is considered about 110 degrees. So I'm going to remove it from the heat and I'm just going to let it sit. And in the meantime, I'm going to crack my 3 eggs and I'm just going to whisk them together and then let them sit, because as soon as our orange and milk and butter mixture is cool enough, we're going to whisk in our eggs. All right, so our milk and butter and orange rind mixture has cooled appropriately. The first thing we're going to do, though, is take a very small, about a quarter of a cup of warm water that's at about 100 degrees Fahrenheit, about 40 degrees Celsius, and we're going to pour in our yeast, and we're going to actually set this aside in a nice warm place, and we're going to let it sit for 5 or 10 minutes until we start to see some bubbling or some foam pop up at the top. In the meantime, we are also going to remove, just shake a little bit, remove the orange rind pieces from this mixture. We are going to use a whisk to mix our eggs into this mixture. And then finally, I have here some orange extract. I'm going to put just a few drops of orange extract in here and whisk that in. Now we can let all of this sit until our yeast is bubbly and ready. So it looks like we're ready to create our pan de muerto dough. The first thing I'm going to do really quickly is I've got sugar, salt, caraway seeds, and flour in this mixing bowl. I'm just going to give it a turn real fast to get everything mixed together. That right there is all it takes. And normally this bread is kneaded by hand. It's mixed and kneaded on the counter, just like pasta dough. But I'm not going to do that today. I'm going to take the easy way out because I got other stuff I've got to cook behind me. So I'm going to mix this in my mixer using my dough hook. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to pour in our yeast and our water. And then I can add my egg and butter and milk and orange mixture. And then I'm going to mix this on low until everything is incorporated. Feel free to use your spatula to scrape down the sides. You will probably need to do that if you're using a mixer like I am. Now that everything is fully incorporated, we are going to mix this on medium speed until the dough pulls off of the sides of the bowl and becomes elastic and smooth. If you don't see this change happening within the first few minutes of kneading, either by hand or in a mixer, then you can add more flour as needed. Just be very, very careful. If you overdo it on the flour, your bread will be tough and it won't rise nearly as well. Our dough has been kneading now for 10 minutes and it looks absolutely wonderful and perfect. So what we're going to do, like with any bread dough, we are going to place it in an oiled bowl, cover it, and let it sit for about an hour and a half in a nice warm place without any wind or drafts in order to allow it to double in size. I'm just going to get my fingertips wet really quickly in order to transfer the dough into the bowl so that my fingers don't stick. There we go. All right, so now we can cover it and set it aside. Our dough has risen beautifully. I have here a cookie sheet that's been lined with baking paper. I'm just going to set this off to the side so that it's ready. We are going to form our loaves. To do that, we just need our dough and a lot of extra flour. Now, something that is unique about pan de muerto is the shape of the dough. It's actually going to look like a round of bread, but it's going to have bones on the top of it because it's the bread of the dead. So we'll take our dough, give it a quick punch. It is still going to be sticky. Look at that. So we've got to be really careful to use our flour very well. And we're going to divide up this dough a little bit. I'm going to try and get some of the sticky off the back of my hands here. It is still going to also have some olive oil on it, which will help. So what we're going to do, just sprinkle it with a little bit of flour. It will have already absorbed the flour on the table, so we have to be a little bit careful there too. There we go. We're going to first begin by separating a piece of the loaf. I like to use my bench scraper, and I'm just going to take off a piece that's, I don't know, about the size of a big lemon, and I'm going to set that aside on some flour. Just right over here. Now for the rest of this, I'm going to divide the dough in half as best as I can, and we're going to make 2 big round balls. Just like that. And then we will softly shape the dough into a round. And once I have the shape that I would like, I can set that on my cookie sheet. And now comes the extra bits. So we had set aside this little bit of dough right here. I'm going to take off a little bit, and I'm going to actually separate this out and just make 2 little balls, just like this. And they can just get set aside. Now, here's where the tricky bit comes in. We're going to separate this actually into 6 pieces, which seems a little bit like, what? But we are going to do it. About, see, about there and about there. And then we're going to take these and we're going to make them into little ropes. And then we're going to take these ropes and lay them across the top of our circle. Just like that. The idea being that these are our bones. And using your fingers can really help you to get the little bubbles. There we are. All right, so these are finished for now. We're going to place these along with the 2 balls that we have here. We're going to leave those separate. We're going to just place them in opposite corners. We're going to lightly cover this with paper towels and let it sit again for about 45 minutes to an hour until the loaves have puffed up again for us. In the meantime, you'll want to preheat your oven to, I believe it's 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which is going to be about 175 degrees Celsius. Here are our lovely fluffy loaves, along with our 2 little marble-sized, which are now, of course, bigger balls. What we're going to do, first things first, we need to get these plopped on top of there. To do that, we're going to use just a little bit of cold water. I'm going to dab my finger in the cold water. I'm going to dab my finger on the top of the loaf. Pick up one of these and just plop him right there on top and press down just a little bit. And now, in order to make these beautiful and shiny when they come out of the oven, we're going to brush these in some egg wash, which is just a single beaten egg and a little bit of olive oil. And these are now ready to go into the oven. We are going to bake these at 350 degrees Fahrenheit, about 175 degrees Celsius for around 30 minutes or until the loaves are a nice, even golden brown. It is possible that as they expand, they're going to expand into each other. It's no problem. We'll just cut them apart when they're finished. So in about 10 minutes, our bread is actually going to come out and we're going to have to bake it a second time. In the first 35 minutes of baking, it's going to get nice and brown, but it won't be finished all the way through. And so we actually want it to bake more, but we don't want the top of the bread to brown anymore. That's where my tin foil comes in. So you see here, I have actually 2 pieces of aluminum foil. They're about the same size and they're laid right on top of each other. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna make a mega sheet of tin foil because the aluminum has to go all the way over our cookie sheet and over our bread. The best way to make a piece of mega aluminum foil is just at the very edge of one of the long sides, fold that over nice and straight. And then you're going to do it again. Right along the same, about the same thickness as your last fold. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to fold over all the way up and down. Oops, see, you can't do that. Ugh. Here we go. I'll fix it, don't worry. And then just make sure that the fold is really, really strong. And then we're going to do it one more time. Maybe mom or dad has done this when they're trying to cover a roasted turkey, for example. This is a common trick. And so now what we have is we have a mega piece of aluminum foil that we're going to use in a few minutes to cover up our bread. In just a moment, I'm going to be taking our bread out of the oven, placing it here, and getting my tin foil. We'll want to work quickly because even though the bread is going to look really nice and finished, we've still got to bake it for another 15 to 20 minutes, which means that it could collapse if we're just not, super quick about it. So here comes the bread. It is beautifully browned, but still not done in the middle yet. This must be done very carefully. This cookie sheet is extremely hot. It will be hot through the tin foil, so you still can't touch this, which is why I'm going to try and use an oven mitt and a kitchen towel in order to keep myself from being burnt. All right, even the great Miss Dani, who absolutely never likes to do anything unsafe, did have to take off her mittens in order to do this. There just wasn't any other way. However, I did it very gently, and I really only touched aluminum foil and I used my fingertips. I did not touch the pan, and I managed to do it without getting burned. So we've just lightly draped this tin foil over and just tucked in the edges so it won't come out. Now we're going to put it back in the oven for about 15 to 20 minutes or until these loaves are all the way finished. It's just about time to take our bread out. In fact, my timer just went for 15 minutes, so I'm going to grab the bread and we're going to have a look. We are going to carefully and gently take off the foil. There will be steam underneath, so do not just lift it. Lift a corner, keep your hand out of the way and let that steam escape so you don't burn yourself. And there we are, 2 beautiful loaves of bread. We do need to let these cool right where they are for just a couple of minutes. Then we're going to take them off of the baking tray. I'd like you to melt some butter, maybe a 1/4 of a cup or so of butter in the microwave. Grab yourself a brush because it's the final step for this bread is topping it with sugar. So you can see now my loaves of bread are actually on top of the rack. They've just been sitting here for a couple of minutes, and I've put the cookie sheet underneath the rack because it's going to help me to catch sugar. I also have a very small bowl of melted butter here, and I'm going to brush 1 loaf. We're going to start with 1 loaf with some of the melted butter. Then I'm going to use the cookie tray to catch sugar as I sprinkle and pour it all over the loaf and get it to stick to the butter. So it's very simple. But we want to work quickly because we want the sugar, of course, to stick to the bread. And then this will still be warm, which is a good thing. It means the sugar will stick. And you're just going to sprinkle, sprinkle, sprinkle. You can tilt it once you've gotten a lot of sugar on there and just kind of tap him off to get the extra. But you want to see the sugar It's a sugary bread. All right, tap, tap, tap. That's one down, one to go. And now we can let these cool fully.